Number one, Ari. They barely survived today against Missouri. Major Burns cost me a 5 in a row on my lock of the week, but ultimately, this is a team that already has 2 losses. Two bad losses because Ole Miss is not a great team. They're a good team, and then you got embarrassed by by Florida State on a neutral field to start the season. And for an LSU team that I don't think I was alone in pitching the idea that this is a team that could compete, dare I say, win a national championship. I think a lot of people were nervous, but certainly if you're just looking around and the dudes everywhere ethos, LSU had a lot of them, and they're sitting here. It's October 8th. They have 2 losses. They should have had 3 going on the road to Mizzou today, but they still have 2. You're looking up at Alabama, which looks like a much, much tougher ball game. And I believe that they go to Tuscaloosa. So the idea that you're sitting here in October, you're already out of the SEC, of the national championship race. I mean, in theory, maybe you could win out and have a case to get in the playoff. You'd need a lot of help, but probably not. And even the idea of trying to win the SEC West looks tough because, you got to win a bunch of games between now and then. So LSU, a very deserving number one that won today, but the defense is a disaster. Brady Cook throws for like 400 yards. It's a problem.
Yeah, I think that the LSU, you did a really good job of breaking all of that down. And I don't really know if there's much more to add to that, but that is in addition to the fact that when they play, they just look broken.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just like, that's it. The players they have on their team and the results that they're having in terms of what they look like out on the field, I think is an implication or a key into some dysfunction or some wires not connecting. And I don't know what those are. And I think that's the most disappointing thing. It's like, okay, you can go out and lose to a very good Florida State team. You could even lose to Ole Miss, but they couldn't get a stop in that game. It didn't look like their players were being used in the right way. I didn't see a ton of improvement with their quarterback for year over year. And it just looked like every other possible way that you could have envisioned this team being a national championship contender just did not happen.
That's a good way to put it.
And I just think that, yeah.
Other than Mississippi State, have we seen a flash of LSU looking like the team that a lot of people, myself included, thought they were going to
look broken?
Yeah. It's one thing to lose games. It's another thing that we haven't even seen this LSU team. I mean,
and it reminds me too of like that.
FSU.
Did you see that Hugh Freeze clip? I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, where he was talking about how long it takes to build a team. And somebody said, actually, Kirby Smart won a national title in year 2. And he goes, "Oh, year 2, huh?" Yeah, got to the national championship game in year 2. And he goes, "Yeah, that doesn't sound right to me." Like, it was like really funny. Yeah. But it's like, it is year 2. You are in Louisiana. You do have a wealth of talent, and you are a very good destination for transfers. There's no reason why your team should look incompetent through 6 weeks of the season. And when you're a team like LSU too, there has to be a weighted system here of most disappointment also goes hand in hand with teams with the highest expectations.
Yeah.
And LSU fans expect a lot from their team. So that's a nice segue to my number 2, which I don't, did it not make your list at all? Clemson?
Clemson did not make my list.
That's banana land. I don't know how that's even possible. You have a team that, hired one of the sexiest, hires of the offseason and Garrett Riley to be the offensive coordinator. You have Cade Klubnik coming back. You have a top 4 talent composite team coming into the season. And, you have a team that, by and large should have been the favorite to win the ACC. And then you come out in the first game of the year and not only lose to Duke, but lay an egg in a very similar fashion to the way that things were going the previous year. And then now to lose 2 in a row, obviously, or not 2 in a row, 2 already in this season. Another hard-fought loss where a game they could have won against Florida State, could have gotten the season back on track, and then gotten completely eliminated by mid-October out of the national championship discussion during a fan base that had become accustomed to being in the thick of that discussion year over year, regardless of turnover on staff or roster. How on earth could they not make your list? It's a complete disaster in their minds. Even if they continue to win out. They're not okay. They're out.
I think
this isn't next year.
This is a preseason expectations I think. And I had a lot more modest expectations for Clemson preseason. I think what you said is correct. And I thought the Garrett Riley, Clay Klubnik thing might be something special. But I still had a lot of questions about this Clemson team. And the talent composite is what the talent composite is. But that Duke game was weird. They had a bunch of weird red zone stuff. I haven't come away with this thinking this is a completely different team than the team that we expected to see in the preseason. I think they've just lost games to good teams. The other teams on my list, when I look at them, I'm saying this is not the team that I thought we were going to see.
Clemson is out of the national championship discourse. They're done.
Yeah, but all right, they were never in it for me.
They were never in it.
We disagree. No,
they were like the favorite to win the ACC. Every Power 5 team that's a favorite to win their conference is in it.
Okay,
and we're talking about a team that is in it every single year for the most part.
For the record, I picked Florida State to win the ACC this year. So
that's a really savvy pick. I'm happy for you. You don't think their fans thought they were going to be in it?
Maybe
we're talking about disappointed fans. We're not talking about what you thought they may or may not be.
That's fair.
They're supposed to be in
I still think Clemson looks up at the end of the year and they're 10-2 and they're fine.
And they'd probably be the 5 seed next year. And that's what you're going to get next year. But now they're out.
Careful, we're going to derail the whole show.
I'm just saying it's beautiful. They're done. They lost twice and they're out. Now we don't got to think about them anymore.
Sounds like a lot of irrelevant games. It'd be nice if some of those were relevant down the stretch, don't you think?
Yeah, we had some relevant games and they lost them. And now they're paying the consequences for losing them because that is the way that life works. You show up for a job interview or you don't show up for it. You don't get to do it again. Okay.
Well, my number 2, Ari, is A&M. And oh boy, man, I thought they could get the job done today. I came away from this game today thinking more about Alabama and being more impressed with Alabama personally than setting off all the alarm bells with A&M. But this is year 5 or is it year 6, sorry, of the Jimbo experiment?
I think it's year 6, bud.
Oh, and you've had one good year during COVID in which you didn't make the playoff and you lost to Alabama by 4 touchdowns. You haven't won the West, which Brian Kelly did in year 1. You have nothing of consequence here, and you already have another season where it's looking like you're going to be looking up at almost everyone. And it's just you can't go another 8-4, another 7-5, another 9-3. That's not good enough. And the games that you could win that would sort of change how the season is viewed, even if the record is not great. You've already kind of coughed that up with Alabama. You've still got LSU there at the end. The Miami game, the defensive struggles in that game are a disaster, and then Miami loses tonight. So the idea that, we lost to a Miami team that was really underrated and might win the ACC, that seems like that's probably not the case. And Georgia Tech's defense handled them quite well tonight. So A&M, man, you don't want to talk about talent composite, all right? What are they, number 3?
Yeah.
And same old Aggies.
A&M is on my list too.
I didn't take the bait this year. I kind of thought they'd be an 8 or 9 win team. I could see if they made a run and won the West, I was gonna be like, well, finally. I mean, sure, but this looks like the same old Aggies, Ari, and I'm sorry for the Aggie fans, but that's where we're at.
Yeah, they're on my list too. And since we're using the disappointing loss as a segue to talk about the games, why don't we talk about the other side of it? Because the thing that I had a hard time with A&M fans was coming into it. I don't know what their reasonable expectations were for this year and whether or not they can continue to reach those expectations. I think they came into this game on Saturday thinking that if they won this game, they were going to win the West for the first time and make it to Atlanta.
True.
That was the opportunity. They didn't just lose to Alabama, which was a chance for them to beat a team like that and, duplicate some of the other Alabama wins that they've had the last 3, 4, 5 years. Mm-hmm. But this was an opportunity to not only win a game on your home field, but then to seize control of your side of the conference in a year where the SEC West is very vulnerable. Yeah. And I think that's what's most disappointing. Like, they weren't supposed to be in this position in some of their minds, and they were. They beat the crap out of Alabama in the first half and then completely laid it out. They scored. Yeah, they kicked a field goal in the second half, 3 points.
Yeah.
But didn't do anything at all.
Had a field goal blocked.
I wrote, had a field goal block that should have been blocked for a touchdown, and then it got called back because of a weird back block call. But here's the thing I want to talk about a little bit with you now, because you were anti-Alabama coming into the year in terms of their deficiencies. I think those deficiencies were on display. If you watched the Alabama game, you didn't come away thinking that they were awesome. you came away thinking, or at least I did, feeling that Texas A&M just kind of blew it a little bit. They have a lot of deficiencies. They're a deeply flawed team. Then at the same time, it's like they go in and they beat another top 25 team in a consecutive week. They go on a road in a hostile environment and just take Texas A&M's lunch money. And then you look at the rest of their schedule, you look at the SEC West, and it's like, is there an inevitability factor that you're starting to feel about Alabama playing in Atlanta this year? Because it's starting to feel like it. Yeah.
It feels like that. I mean, this Alabama team is mentally tough. You saw that today. They're down a touchdown, and Kyle I think Kyle, personally, top 2 or 3 place to play in the country. You're down a touchdown to a team that really wants to beat you, that's on top of you. They didn't flinch. Credit to Alabama. This is still a pretty young team. I don't know that you're going to get 186 yards and 8 catches out of Jermaine Burton every week. And Jalen Milroe, we didn't see him get loose, and A&M clearly did what I thought they were going to do. We talked about this week, Ari, is make him beat you with his arm, and he did that.
There
are a handful of balls.
23 rushing yards, Dave.
Yeah. There's a handful of balls from him where you're just like, oh my gosh, son. Like, you got to hit that. But he hit enough. And they're out of there with a win. And this is not going to be a dominant Alabama team. I think when they play teams that cannot contend with them physically, they're going to bully them a little bit. We've seen that a little bit. But I think they've leaned into who they are. The South Florida experiment, I think they're never going to speak of that again. I think that they've already punted that that's game tape as far as they possibly can. And they're going to design their situation around what Milroe can and can't do. And they did a really nice job of putting him in places to succeed today. And he was good enough to win them the game. And they're not going to play a lot of teams this year that are better than the team that they played today in Kyle Field. LSU's probably on that list. We'll see what Tennessee is, but they get them at home. They already choked out Ole Miss. Kentucky, they're on the road. We'll see what Kentucky is.
I like your words for beating teams. Punked, choked out, curb stomped. It's very violent.
Well, football's a violent game, Ari. But
yeah. So here's the thing that I wrote in the column. Is it possible that Nick Saban's greatest achievement, maybe not greatest, he's got a lot of great achievements.
He's done some good stuff, yeah.
But as a curtain call, as the sun sets on his tenure, when I say sun sets, I don't mean
Ari,
this year, but in the last, I think we can assume maybe it's the last 5 to 7 years of his coaching tenure, that he could take an average or borderline Alabama-ass team in comparison to the ones that they've had in the past and still make the playoff or play for even more. Like when you think about I think that you can make the case that some of the issues that they've had offensively are because of him. So I have a hard time saying like coach of the year for overcoming the adversity that you created. But are they going to Atlanta? Sure. I think they are. Could they beat Georgia? Sure. Like, could they take this Alabama team that is average by every aspect and every metric that you could possibly come up with as it relates to comparing them to former Alabama teams and slide this team into the playoff? It reminds me a little bit of the 14 Blake Sims team a little bit. That was the worst team of the Saban era coming into it. I don't know. This one probably gives that a run for its money. I don't think that it's out of the question. And people are like, relax. Alabama stinks. You watch the game. They're not very good. They're going to lose again. And that might be true. But it's not necessarily only about how good or how much improved Alabama is from the Texas or South Florida games. It's also the question is, if it's not Alabama, then who is it? Like, we're getting to the point now where it's just like, if you think Alabama stinks, why don't you take a look around at who they're going to be playing this year?
Yeah, and the flaws on offense have gotten a lot of attention because we're so used to Alabama having that dominant offense. I got to look at the numbers, but this is the best Alabama defense in a long time, Ari. You look at what
Sam Callan here says, Ari, Bama is not beating UGA.
Okay.
It's like, Sam, I love you, buddy, and I'm happy that you're here. Do you think you're teaching me something? Like, do you think that, like, I don't know that Georgia is a better football team than Alabama right now? But if Alabama's defense at the end of the year is rocking shit and they're playing in a dome and you have a team that figures it out with the deepest, most talented roster in college football history, It's not a slam dunk, especially considering the fact we're 6 days removed from half of the Georgia fan base wanting to fire their offensive coordinator.
Ole Miss scored 10 points against these guys.
I don't know that it's a foregone. Everything is so cut and dry, foregone conclusion. Do I think that Georgia's going to win the game? Of course I do. I have eyes. We all have eyes. We see what you see. Is it over? I thought it was over a few weeks ago. It's not over. We're just getting started. And the guy that's coaching that football team now there knows a thing or two about how to coach a team. So I'm just saying, if you thought that this was going to be the last year of the 4-team playoff where we get some debates and we weren't going to have Alabama involved, you're wrong. And again,
it's looking that way.
So Rick on here, or so sick Rick. Bama just beat a team that won 4 games last year with the emoji. Do you hear what we're saying? We didn't say that Alabama's 2019 LSU. We said they have the pieces to win in a crappy side of their conference and maybe figure it out at the end of the year. Context. That's it.
Should we move down the list, Ari?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, did I lose my mind there a little bit?
That's all right. We both agree at number 3. This is
who's
our number 3, Notre Dame. And Ari, this was to me on the short list of most shocking results of the year for me. And I think, again, I don't want to lessen what Louisville did tonight. I'm happy for Jeff Brom. This was really impressive. That was a great crowd in Louisville. Had Donovan Mitchell, Jack Harlow, all the Louisville royalty in town. But Ari, Notre Dame looked like a tired football team that's played a bunch of big football games in a bunch of weeks in a row. And
that's what you got out of it?
That's not what I got out of it.
Okay.
Notre Dame is not a great football team. They're a good football team, but Ari, they looked tired. And Louisville is better than I thought they were going to be, but I didn't come away from that thinking Louisville, oh, this is a top 10 team. I did not come away from that thinking that.
Yeah, I think that I came away with it just like re-questioning everything we thought we knew about the sport this year.
How so? What do you mean? I'm surprised to hear that.
We're going to get to this later on in the show, and I don't know if this is an okay segue now. You say, and a lot of people say that I'm overly tough on Ohio State because of my perspective of them. Are we sure they're very good this year? Like, do you watch them play? State? Do you watch them play? There's something missing with them. And I've covered the team long enough to know what great looks like and what good looks like, and they don't look great.
Yes.
So they beat Maryland 37-17. I don't know if this means that they're not going to win the national championship or make the playoff or lose to Michigan. Those are all these questions are going to be answered. All I'll say is that I think Ohio State looks off. They look in the beginning of games, they turn it on, they beat the crap out of Maryland in the second half. But for a minute there, I thought that there was a chance they could lose this game. And Maryland's a little bit better than they've been in the past. And, they did some things that, like before halftime, they didn't get a field goal because they threw check down in the middle of the field with no timeouts left and the clock ran out, like stupid stuff like that. But they seem fractured in a way that I can't quite put my thumb on.
You know what Ohio State looks like to me, Ari?
The number 11 team in college football.
They look like a team that's going to get bullied by Michigan again. That's what they look like.
Yeah, well, but anyway, so we're 2 weeks removed from Ohio State beating Notre Dame on the road and finding this like grit, tough program defining word tough win. And it's like, what if Notre Dame is top ass?
Do you not think there is something to where Notre Dame was just physically?
Sure. I'm sure
that takes a toll on teams, and this is early in the season. Okay, so they go to NC State. That's not that big of a game, but you have Ohio State, then you have Duke on top of that, and then you go to Louisville. That's some quality teams. Maybe not so much NC State, but Ohio State and Duke back to back.
Notre Dame looked like they didn't know how to run offense tonight. So if you think that's because they're tired, that's fine. They looked completely and utterly inept for 4 quarters of football.
Yeah.
And, if you think they're tired, that's your prerogative. I think that there is something, there's something more to it than that. But, and listen, like everybody thinks that I'm overreacting. Ohio State is fine. The thing that I love about Ohio State fans, and it's something that's happened to me while on the beat, I will make an observation about the way that the team looks. Everybody on Ohio State's fan base will be like, yeah, you're right. I agree with you. Then as the game goes on and Ohio State starts to pull away, those fans become angry at the notion that was correct at the beginning of the game and dismiss that it's a reality. And my thought process is that they look disinterested, they look a step slow, they look less passionate than other teams that are playing in big games, and it just doesn't seem to be clicking for me. And it might not cost them a game next week. It didn't cost them a game on Saturday, but they consistently play with this type of tenor. And if they do that, it will jump up and bite them in the ass sooner rather than later. So somebody said, I don't believe in, Kyle McCord. Obviously, he's got a lot of growth to do. The one test that he's had this year with his back against the wall, he led a game-winning drive and, showed some stones. I've got respect for the growth process there. And I'm not even saying that Ohio State can't make the playoff or even win the national championship this year. I'm just telling you from my, I think, seasoned eye of covering that team, I know when they have it and when they don't. Mm-hmm. And if you're an Ohio State fan who is honest with yourself, watching the game today or watching some of the other games from this year, even the end of the Notre Dame game, they ended up pulling it out, but there is something not quite adding up there. And we'll see who's right and wrong. But, if you think that I'm crazy, then I don't know what games you're watching, because that was a very uncomfortable half of football that they played against a team that they shouldn't have had a hard time physically measuring up to. So, okay, that's the
Urban looked happy. Didn't he even say it? We lost the line of scrimmage the first half.
Yeah, well, you said if they don't,
hard to believe.
If they don't win the line
on Notre Dame, the thing about these Saturday shows is it's hard to get numbers to contextualize in the moment. But by my eyes, I think Notre Dame ran for 9 carries for like half a yard on 3rd and shorts tonight. That was a big thing. The lack of physicality and the lack of creativity for Notre Dame in those short yardage situations over and over and over again tonight. It put them behind the 8 ball against a Louisville team that they are better than. They're a better team. You went on the road. It was not going to be an easy game, but you went on the road. You lost to a team that you're better than because you didn't play up to your potential for whatever reason. You can chalk it up to whatever you want. I do think there's an element of being physically tired after the kind of games that they've played the last couple of weeks. Emotionally getting back and trying to get up for another team that, for Louisville, a team that has a pretty weak schedule, and you get Notre Dame in your house, that's a Super Bowl, right? And they won it tonight. So the short yardage stuff to me jumped out as the most concerning thing from Notre Dame. And I think the way that we didn't see them blow anybody off the ball, to me, looks like a team that just didn't have it.
But also, too, a reinvigorated ACC race with Florida State, UNC, and Louisville now. It'll be fun to see which teams can push it a little bit further than we thought that they could at the beginning of the year, and some new blood's always exciting. So, hats off to Louisville for physically beating up Notre Dame. Whether it was Notre Dame's fatigue or their schedule, I guess there's probably something to that. But they won 33-20, and Notre Dame's going for it on 4th and 11 from their own 30-yard line with 9 minutes left, down by a touchdown, I think, right?
Yeah.
They're down by 2 scores at that point. But still, it was a weird call. Of desperation that just then the game unraveled. So, there's a lot to unpack with both of those. But from a fan base standpoint, I'm sure Notre Dame came in thinking, well, we finally got our quarterback. We have a guy who's a 25-year-old man who's might be one of the most handsome men I've ever seen in my entire life.
It's running impressive.
The offense. He's got it going on. But
our number 4, Ari,
with 2 losses is a tough pill to swallow if you're a Notre Dame fan.
Yeah. Our number 4 we agree on, Texas Tech. We don't need to belabor it. Team that had a lot of hype coming into the season. I don't think I added to that in any way, Ari. I wouldn't say that.
No. I don't think you did at all.
But you're sitting here. You've got losses to Wyoming, which was eye-popping. Oregon, I think that loss actually aged pretty well. You were in that ball game, but you just lost a really good Oregon team. And then we'll see what West Virginia is. But at the end of the day, you're still not looking anything close to a Big 12 contender, much less a champion or a team that should be taken seriously. So a good win today against Baylor, who we'll talk about in a second as well, I believe. But yeah, Tech not getting it done.
Yeah, my list was LSU, Clemson, Notre Dame, Tech, and A&M. So I think we covered all of them.
Well, my number 5 is Arkansas, Ari.
Yeah.
And the vibes are not good. They're not good in Arkansas right now. This is a team. It's never good when your coach is having to delete his Twitter account. That's a bad sign. But it just looks a little hopeless for the first time in a long time for Arkansas. They don't have a conference win yet. They have one FBS win over a Kent State team that got portaled to death. They didn't exactly blow them out of the water. They lost to a BYU team that's not fantastic. Gave one away at LSU, a game that they probably felt like they should have won. You lose to A&M, and then today I don't know how to characterize that loss to Ole Miss, but they weren't the better team today. You're on a 4-game losing streak, are you? And you look down the schedule, and there's not a lot of wins left, and you got to go to Bama next week. So Arkansas, I think the SEC West is always interesting, and I think this is one of those years where it's like somebody's got to finish last. Seems like it's down in Mississippi State and Arkansas, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
how's your group chat hanging in there? Are they doing okay?
It's been tough, man. It's quiet, which is that's actually worse than when the fans are angry, because apathy is sort of starting to set in of like, this is hopeless. That's actually a bad sign. And then we'll give a shout out to Baylor, who seemed like a bowl team before the season and now looks like the worst team in the Big 12 by quite a margin. They're getting bullied.
My lock of the week was Texas Tech -1, and they won by a lot more than 1.
Yes,
so that was an easy win. Yeah, and it never even seemed like they had to sweat in that game. So, and Dave, let me interject here one last one too. I don't think that we submitted our disappointment rankings before the Miami game. I think we both can add Miami somewhere into that list.
I mean, I guess they're still 5-1. Like, you still control your fate. I know. I don't disagree.
When your coach loses that game, I don't like Ralph Russo from the AP just texted us in the group chat. That was amongst the worst losses I have ever seen a college football team take. I honestly cannot recall a worse one off the top of my head.
Well, the gold standard, Ari, is, are you aware of the Baylor UNLV game from, I believe, 1999? Have you heard about this game?
It's not off the top of my head, no.
Okay, well, it's worse. It's the gold standard for worst loss in the history of college football. I believe Baylor was up by 3. There was like 15 seconds. I don't know exactly how much time was left. They had the ball on like 2-yard line. Instead of kneeling, they tried to go in for the score. They not only fumbled, Ari, they gave up a 99-yard scoop and score to lose to UNLV. And I believe this was Guy Morris. I think it was Guy Morris. It might have been Kevin Steele. I forget. This is off the top of my head, so I forget who it was. It might have been, I think it was Kevin Steele. The chat will probably correct me, I'm sure. But either way, to go from the ball on the goal line up 3 with a handful of seconds left to losing is very hard to do. And that is the gold standard. But today was pretty bad.
See, I think that this is worse because...
No.
Dave, hear me out, buddy.
It was not worse.
Buddy.
Contextually, probably worse.
They both could have taken knees, okay? So you're even there.
Mm-hmm.
But then the rest of that game is a fumble. Both teams fumbled. In one game, the other team picked it up and ran with it. In this game, not only did you fumble it to Georgia Tech, you gave up a broken coverage Hail Mary as the time expired. This is worse. This is a worse loss. And they lost to Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't. It's just like, it's like, when you talk about disappointed fan bases, you go from that Will Ferrell movie where Wedding Crashers, he goes, "Oh, I'm hang gliding, oh, I'm dead." That's what it feels like. It's like Miami was like all the way up. They're going to be 5-0. They had a big win against Texas A&M. Mario Cristobal has it humming, and then not only do you lose, your coach took it from you.
Yeah, I don't remember the Cristobal 2018 Oregon doing this, but I'm
apparently he did it at Oregon too.
Yeah, I think